Hello everyone. 2022 is here, and with it the hopes of new and legit UFO information. I'm really hopeful for this year and want to be with you guys every step of the way. Last we spoke, I was under the weather, and thank goodness we made the video when we did, because the day after the release, I got even sicker and I lost my voice completely. Now thankfully, I'm coming out of this sickness, but I still can't go a couple of sentences without coughing. So today, all I wanted to do was share with you a couple of really good interviews that I newly discovered over the holidays. They are a couple of really good interviews of very famous alien abduction cases. Two of my favorite, as a matter of fact. And the cool thing about the interviews we're going to share with you today is that they were done very soon after the incident actually happened. We'll be watching an interview done by a TV show on the Pascagoula Incident, and then we'll be listening to part of the first interview Travis Walton gave after his experience, with his memories fresh as can be. But first, let's dive into the Pascagoula Incident.
Last October, in the quiet Mississippi town of Pascagoula, two local men confronted authorities with a rather bizarre story. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker told of a strange craft landing near their fishing site and of being taken aboard by three unearthly creatures. The two men were questioned under hypnosis and lie detectors, but their story remained intact. One of the men suffered a nervous breakdown and is still under treatment. Among the skeptics were Ralph and Judy Blum, already at work on a UFO book. With W5 last week, Ralph and Judy returned to Pascagoula.
Judy and I stumbled into this book. It came to us to be written. Suddenly we were in a wave of waves. UFOs were being seen across the country again. We were in what they call a flap. And people began experiencing things that they couldn't explain. Something was happening in our skies in the midst of Watergate, Agnew, the energy crisis, the Middle East. Something was happening and people couldn't understand what it was. We spoke about UFOs, but nobody really knew. And then it hit right here where we are. It hit Pascagoula. Charlie Hickson entered the news, and we had a book to write.
Something happened October of '73 that would go down in history. The spaceship king with many blue lights sat down near them in the night. Three little men came out and took him inside. They looked him over with one big eye. They say what they saw was the real. They know they were the ones that saw the Pascagoula UFO.
We were sitting on the other side of the pier with our feet, over toward the river, fishing in the river. And the fish still wasn't biting, so I told Calvin, I said, well, we might as well go home. But I guess that was when I heard it. It was some kind of zipping sound. And when I turned around, in this area out here, about 40 or 50 feet out there, there was some kind of craft, it looked like it was going to come right onto the ground. But it came on down and hovered about a foot and a half or 2 feet off of the ground. But we didn't know what to do, the river behind us and that out there not knowing what it was. So, and then before we had time to really do anything, it seemed like an opening appeared. And toward the end, it was, toward us. And the blue light, it had blue flashing lights as it was, approaching the ground, but then they went out. And when the opening appeared, some source of light came from the inside. It was just almost blinding.
Sheriff Diamond, can you tell me just what happened that night?
No, sir, I can't. All I can tell you is there was two men came into the sheriff's department approximately 8:30 and 9 o'clock. They were all excited and upset, wanting to climb the walls, hysterical, crying. That's actually all I know is what happened. I mean, as far as me seeing what happened, I don't know.
Of course, we could see them in the opening coming from, when it started out to craft. But
Did you think it was people coming out at first?
Well, they had. I kind of thought it was people at first, off like that. But of course, when they appeared there in front of me, it was the most shock I've ever had in my life.
What did you see?
Well, they were shorter than me. I'd say about 5'2" or 3", and they didn't have a neck. their head, it seemed to come directly to their shoulders. And it had something, it came out to a point about where a nose would be, and on each side the ears. And I believe that they looked like they were a little longer on the ears than the nose.
But still pointed the ears.
They were still pointing, yes.
But since I was down there, and since I was a physician, and several other scientists and investigators were asked to consult and look into the situation, I was asked if would I mind if I would be present, and I said I wouldn't mind at all. And while it is still very difficult for us to believe that a spaceship landed and that robot-type creatures came out and actually took these two people into the spaceship, these men, in my opinion, believed that they saw this and that they were being honest in reporting what they have reported.
But it seemed to me when they came out that doorway, or that opening, or whatever it was, then just almost instantly they were right there on us. And their arms, they had arms, and I saw the arms moving here and in the shoulders, but they had webbed. I mean, their fingers were webbed, and then they had something like a thumb, and they were like this.
Mm-hmm. We questioned them at length. And then we left the room and recorded all the conversation they had. Recorded between the two of them. And one of them kept wanting to pray. And he said, after all I went through on this earth, he said, why should I have to see something like this?
Calvin Parker, I was questioning him, and at one time he wanted to climb the wall. That's how nervous and how shook up he was.
They had me one on this arm like this, and on the other one, you know, they had my other arm like that. And I just seemed to lift up to the same height they were off the ground, and we just moved into the craft.
Now inside, how did they lay you out? Do you remember how it happened?
Yes. I didn't see any tables or chairs or anything in there. I'm not saying it wasn't in there because the light was almost blinding, but I didn't see any. And when they carried me inside, they seemed to just lean me back, you know. And this eye, well, I keep referring to it as an eye, and it moved up in front of me about this close. And it started right at my eyes, looking me right in the eye. And it hesitated there for a few seconds, and it just started moving over my entire body. When they brought me from the craft along this area here, and they didn't drop me, you know, they just released me back to the ground. And I fell. I don't know why my legs were weak. I don't know why it was the fright or what it was, but I fell onto the ground. And that's when I seen Calvin. He's standing right over here in this area, and he was standing facing the river with his arms outstretched like that, just like he was staring at something.
And tell me about the lie detector test.
Well, so that was run by Pilkington. Was it Pilkington?
Pennington.
Pennington.
That they run this type of test about 6 times a day. And when they were asked to come over here to talk to these people, they had in their mind that it was just a big joke. And if I understand it correctly, they ran one test on Mr. Hickson. The machine showed that he was telling the truth. Then they run another one. And then the examiner, he began to wonder himself. So he ran the 3rd test, and he believed just what Mr. Hickson had told him.
Mr. Booth, tell me what happened that night in October.
Well, I got up and had turned off the TV and come to the front door, which you could see right behind me. Just as usual, checking to see if it was locked. So I looked out the window at the top, and naturally I saw this object above the street light out there. So naturally it caught my eye with the lights was on. I couldn't hear any racket or anything. So I opened the door after a few seconds to step out to see if I could really tell what it was. It just took off.
Can you describe it?
Well, it was round, had lights all the way around it, turning in a counter-clockwise motion. It had a dome on top with a bright light shining out through the top of it. To tell the actual figure of it or anything, you couldn't tell. You could just see the lights and the one on top.
When it happened to Charlie, the creatures, whatever they were, didn't communicate with him. Now, it's enough to say you saw a UFO to give you trouble these days in some towns. To be taken aboard is just a suspect idea. But somehow, if the creatures don't give you a message, you're just a touch less incredible. And Charlie says what he said and what we wrote about in the book. It was like they had a job to do, and they came and they did it.
I think there has to be a reason why that Calvin and me was picked.
Maybe because you could take it.
Well, it might be. I don't know. I think that they know more of what's going on down here on this earth than we think. And I don't know, they might have been, you might say, looking for somebody that could, you might say, hold up under the strain and convince people that there is another world and there's some kind of life on that world up there.
They were the ones that saw the Pascagoula UFO.
What do you all think? Now, maybe I'm just a horrible judge of character, but don't the people in the video we just watched look like regular, honest, salt-of-the-earth people? I've seen my share of liars and deceivers, but to me, these people seem to be telling the truth. Now, let's take a listen to Travis Walton, fresh off of his experience, talk about everything that happened on that fateful day. His abduction account is one of my favorite ones because of all the surrounding happenings that actually make his story much stronger and more believable. Now, in this video, we won't be talking about the things that happened around the incident, but we will listen to a young Travis Walton tell the story. And I want you to think to yourself as you're listening to the story. I want you to imagine yourself there with Travis. And just imagine that if what Travis says is true, then there's a place out there that's not ours, with creatures that are not at all us. Let's take a listen.
We came past the thicket that where we were looking through to where we could see more clearly, and we saw a UFO hovering in the air about 30 yards off to the side of the road. Everybody started yelling, and they stopped the truck. And I wanted to get a closer look, and I got out of the truck, and I started over there. Everyone was yelling that to come back and to stop. I stopped and looked back, and somebody called my name, and I turned back around, and it started to make a noise and started to move, and I took one step. I crouched down behind a log that was there, and just as I started to raise up, I was just going to stand up. I didn't have any intention of going any closer, but it was just as if I was struck. It was kind of a physical blow it just knocked me back. I don't remember seeing any flash of light or anything like what they described. I just lost consciousness. When I regained consciousness, I was looking up at a light shining down on me from the ceiling. I could tell I was leaning up on a bed or a table or something because the ceiling was close. I was in a lot of pain. I couldn't quite bring myself totally awake.
What type of pain? What parts of your body?
It was kind of like in my head, but just all over it. I can't describe it. And I believed that I was in the hospital, and I was looking up at the ceiling, and I didn't make any attempt to move because of the pain I was in, but I felt something laying across my chest, and I looked down, and it was sort of a flat thing that kind of curved across like that, and I couldn't focus my eyes very well, but I looked beyond the top edge of the thing that was laying across me, and I saw two men leaning over me. They weren't really men. They were a lot like they were a lot like men, but they weren't quite human.
What did they physically look like?
They were they had kind of underdeveloped features and no hair of any kind, and they were dressed in kind of a brownish orange.
And how tall were they?
They were slightly shorter than myself.
What type of clothing was they dressed?
It was sort of a loose cover-off. I didn't see any buttons or anything like that. But being in so much pain and everything, I didn't even think. I just lashed out and knocked them back. I could see that there was two on the right side and one on the left. I jumped into the corner.
Did you actually strike them? Did you actually touch them when you lashed out?
Yes, I did. I kind of hit these two with the back of my arm, and they fell back real easily.
Did you feel like hitting a person would?
Yes. They seemed light, like they weren't heavy, but I couldn't stand up very well. I leaned against, there was a bench across the back wall. I say the back wall, I mean there was only one door. And I grabbed up a tube, a clear piece of glass or something, and I tried to break off the end to get something sharp to defend myself with, but they didn't try to approach. They just kind of put out their hands like that, and I was leaning. I couldn't stand up very well. I was breathing very heavily. And they didn't try to approach or anything. They just left. They just ran out real fast. And I was alone there for several minutes, and I couldn't catch my breath. It was very hot. And I was afraid they'd come back. And so I left. They'd gone, there was a corridor outside, and they went to the right, and I went to the left.
You went through the door?
Yeah, there was no door. It was just a doorway.
An open?
And it was a curving hallway that it curved to the right. There was another door with no doorway. It was just a hole. And I went into a room there, and...
Had you gone very far distance at that point?
It was only about 30 feet or 40 feet. I don't know. Not very far. No, not even that far. I don't remember. It was a very narrow corridor, and it was dimly lit everywhere. And I went into this room that you could see out. It was, you could even see the stars back through the wall I just came through. It was, I could still see that there was walls, but I could see the stars at the same time.
And they didn't look like windows?
No, it wasn't like that. And there was nothing in the room but a chair with some controls and knobs and things. I just kind of, I was hysterical. I was frantic, and I one just moved around in there for a while, and I started fooling with the buttons there.
Did you sit in the chair?
And I did later. First I just touched it. I didn't think I should be. I was afraid I'd mess something up and that somebody would come. And I heard somebody come in, and I turned around, and it was a man, just like people. I mean, he wasn't like the other creatures or whatever at all. He looked just like you and I, except he had a helmet on, a sort of a clear helmet.
And he had hair and everything?
Yes. I started babbling questions to him, and I ran over there, and he wouldn't answer me. He just took me by the arm and wanted me to go with him. I thought maybe he can't hear me through the helmet. So we went out through the door, down to the right, and out to the left. There was a small room there that had doors on it, and it was kind of like an airlock thing. It was just a small room with nothing in it. And then there was a door that went outside, and there was a ramp that went down, and it was cool outside. I could feel wind. There was a draft or something. It was a large room that this thing was sitting on the floor in there, and it was shaped like the drawing that they made, like the thing we saw the first time, only bigger. And there was two other things in there, other UFO-looking things that looked like flying saucers, kind of, except they were rounded, an oval shape, and they're really shiny like chrome. It was a big room, like there was a lot more room in there, and there was a curved ceiling that curved this way, and it had flat ends to the room. I came out of the door, out of that first ship, facing this way, and there was a doorway across in the far wall. He led me across there, and through that doorway down a hallway to a room, and I'd had a burning in my chest, and it was starting. I felt better. I was trying to get this man to tell me what I asked him if he was from Earth, and just anything I could think of, and he wouldn't answer.
Was he expressionless? Did he have any expression?
No, he looked friendly. He gestured and smiled, but there was no words.
In this place that you were in, could you see out at all?
No, there was no way out there.
So you were going from one ship to another, was that essentially it?
Yeah. This must have been inside of a larger building or ship. I don't know if it was a large ship or a building. There was no way. I never felt any motion or anything. It was just like being in a large building all the time. Everything was solid. I was led down the hallway. The man sat me in a chair in a room with 3 other people that were like himself. They were dressed in blue. And he went out. There was a door on the other side, and he went on through. And I sat in the chair, and I tried to get the people to talk to me that were there, and they didn't have things on their head, and so I thought that maybe they could hear me, but they wouldn't answer either. There was 2 men and a woman in the room, after the first man left. A man and a woman came from around the table, and they each took me by the arm and led me over to the table and got me up on the table, and I don't know why I should cooperate with them. They put a deal over my face. It was kind of like an oxygen mask thing. It was kind of clear plastic, and it had a round black thing on it about that big, just attached to it. And I looked up at the ceiling, which was just, it was all solid light. There wasn't any light fixture or anything. The light in the room just came from the ceiling. And that was last I remembered. I went to sleep until I woke up. I was laying on the pavement. It was very cold. I woke up very suddenly.
And that'll do it for today. I should be 100% for the next video, so stick around for that. So till that next video, this is Jesse. Thanks for being part of this small UFO community that we're building. And as always, share this content with like-minded individuals and let them know that around here, we love the UFOs. Till next time.